Hashem did not force Paro to oppress Am Yisrael and to try and exterminate them, because that was the plan, obviously, to exterminate the male children and enslave the rest of the people, and eventually you bring about their demise. This is exactly what, for example, Stalin did and his cronies for many, many years in the workers' paradise of the Soviet Union, where millions of people, no one actually knows the real figure, I believe, but we're talking about definitely in the tens of millions. The discussion amongst the historians is whether it's 30 or 60 or what have you million. It's impossible to know. But millions of people who were considered to be problematic, shall we say, were done away with, but they weren't necessarily all executed. They were sent to these remote places where they eventually died from privation. But that is a program of extermination. That is also why the Russian people, I believe, today are in a very bad way, because, and this is also, I think, part of the punishment, part of the onesh that comes about to such people and such societies, because in order to establish the paradise for the workers, you had to do away with anyone who didn't accept this theory, this ideology. So, who did not accept? What kind of person doesn't like such ideas? Because they perceive them to be what they are, that is to say, pure evil. Well, first of all, intellectuals, the people who think, people who understand, people who read, and such people, of course, are a nuisance. And as Stalin famously said, I cannot tell you how it goes in Russian, but he said, if there's no person, there's no problem. So first of all, the intellectuals were all shipped off. They were either summarily executed or shipped off to the Gulag and never heard of again. Well, that, of course, is a tremendous blow to the Russian people in terms of the gene pool, first of all. That means a high percentage of the intellectual, intelligent, and educated class are simply done away with. And that has a tremendous impact, a negative impact on the gene pool. That's the reality. Despite what anyone might tell you, it's all about genes. Or at least over 80% of such outcomes are determined by such factors. So that's number one. Then you had to get rid of all the truly industrious, creative, productive types, the kulaks, the private farmers who had even small plots of land but were able to produce large amounts of food and sell it at the market. And thus you had a food supply. And they did not want to be collectivized. So they had to be gotten rid of. And they were. So that entire class of entrepreneurs, skilled agriculturalists, people with a business mind, people with drive, people with initiative, etc., were removed from Russian society. And so it went down the line. Later it was military officers and Jewish doctors and what have you. In the end, the only thing remaining in such a perverse society is the secret police, the NKVD, later the KGB, etc. That's what's left. In other words, that is the all aspects of the social fabric of the Russian people that existed for centuries, for a millennium, the Russian church, which churches were always a repository of knowledge, of education, at least up to a point. People with spiritual inclinations. So the church was removed from the picture, and the creative and intelligent and productive types were removed from the path, the great march of socialism, and as a result, you end up with a slave class and the secret police. That's all that's left of Russian society, and essentially that's all you've got left today. And I think for that reason, Russian society, the Russian people are, I think, unlikely to recover. And of course, we should add that there are other examples, some of them we should refer to in the present tense, that are going down that same path. North Korea, China to a large extent also.
Even Russia after the war, where a lot of the educated people left.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, there was the exodus of many Jews from well, first of all, really beginning in the 70s, the early 70s, you had a certain number of Jewish refuseniks, Zionists, people who wanted to learn Hebrew, things of this nature, who were eventually allowed to leave. Not huge numbers, but some. That, of course, increased when the Soviet Union began to unravel, and as such things always do, eventually. And then there was the complete collapse, and everything came crashing down, and lots and lots of Jews, and it should be stated, non-Jews who pretended to be Jews, something like a third of that number, left. So again, this is all takes a tremendous toll on a society, and it has multi-generational ramifications. You mentioned also earlier the Aztecs, was it, and other peoples in South America that were essentially simply removed from the face of the earth, or largely. And we know also that they were very similar in their practices to the tyranny, human sacrifice being one of the outstanding features of their civilization.
Likewise with the Phoenicians.
Yes, that's right. Quite right. Yes, as is known with regards to Hannibal and others. So and it's a very good example that you mentioned, because what I was about to say is about these various peoples in South America. They were completely essentially removed from from reality, from history, by the not terribly savory Cortez and the Spaniards and what have you. But their demise was ordained by Hashem. Did it come about in this way? Yes, there was also the diseases that they had no resistance to, and the same thing exactly happened, as we said, with the tyranny. So we see such examples in history. So some people will see such a reality and write a book called. There's a person called Jared Diamond, I think his name is. He wrote a book called Guns, Steel, and Germs, or something like that, referring to the conquest of the Americas, or South America, by the Spanish, and explaining why these peoples had no chance. Because of the guns and the steel, and they didn't have such technology, and they had no resistance to many diseases, etc. All this is true, but these are just the externalities. These are the mechanisms to which you can point if you have a purely materialistic view of human affairs and of reality. But what we're seeing here is the inner workings of reality, not germ theory or metallurgy, but why did this entire chain of events come to be? The answer is because such a society as developed in such societies as developed in South America do not have any. There is no justification for their continued existence. Their evil is too great, and they are done away with. And if the necessary tool in the hands of Hashem are the Spaniards, so be it. There are many. There's
a very interesting book called The End of Everything by Victor Davis.
That's exactly, yes. I have that book. I have that book, and I've read it, and by what's his name, Victor David Hansen. Yeah, a very wise man, and yes, that was what I was referring to before. You mentioned the Phoenicians, Hannibal. Well, Carthage was quite literally wiped off the face of the map. The Romans at some point decided, they were probably looking for an excuse, but they eventually found the excuse, and they expended tremendous effort in literally taking it apart stone by stone and wiping out the population. And that's what happened. So that's another example.